Well, there was something that happened to that country where I worked for 20 years. When the old capitalist ways started to get left by the wayside, they let us vote on it too. And everybody, almost everybody voted for it. We didn't know. We thought it was good. No, that's not true either. We thought we were supposed to think it was good. The plan was that everybody in that country would work according to his ability, and the wealth would be distributed according to their needs. We voted for that plan in a big election, with all of us present, everybody who lived in that country. The politicians made long speeches about it, and it wasn't too clear, but nobody asked any questions. None of us knew how the plan would work. But every one of us thought that the next fella knew it. And if anybody had any doubts, he felt guilty and kept his mouth shut. Because they made it sound like anyone who opposed the plan was a woman hater and a child killer at heart, and less than a human being. They told us that this plan would achieve a noble ideal. Well, how were we to know otherwise? Hadn't we heard it all our lives, from our parents to our school teachers and our ministers? In every newspaper we had ever read, and every movie and every public speech. Hadn't we always been told that this was the righteous and just? Well, maybe there was some excuse for what we did that election, but still, we voted for the plan, and we got it. We got what was coming to us. You know, ma'am, we were marked men in a way, those of us who lived through the 5 years after that election. What is it that hell is supposed to be? Evil. Plain, naked, smirking evil, isn't it? Well, that's what we saw and helped to make. And I think we're damned. Every one of us. And maybe we'll never be forgiven. Do you know how it worked, that plan, and what it did to the people? Try pouring water into a tank where there's a pipe at the bottom, draining it out faster than you can pour it. And each bucket you bring breaks that pipe an inch wider. And the harder you work, the more is demanded of you. And you stand there slinging buckets 40 hours a week, and then 48, and then 56. For your neighbour's supper, for his wife's operation, for his child's measles, and for his mother's wheelchair, and his uncle's shirt, and for his nephew's schooling, and for the baby next door, and for the baby to be born, for anyone, anywhere around you. And it's theirs to receive, from diapers to dentures, and yours to work, from sun up to sundown, month after month, year after year, with nothing to show for it but your sweat, with nothing in sight for you but their pleasure, for the whole of your life, without rest, without hope, without end, from each according to his ability, to each according to his need. We're all one big community, they told us. We're all in this together. But you don't all stand working by a Cecilene torch for 10 hours a day together, and you don't all get bellyache together. What's whose ability, and which of whose needs come first? When it's all in one pot, you can't let any one man decide what his own needs are, can you? If you did, he might claim that he needs a yacht. And if his feelings are what you have to go by, he might prove it too. Why not? If it's not right for me to own a car until I've worked myself into a hospital ward, earning a car for every loafer and every naked savage on earth, why can't he demand a yacht from me too? If I still have the ability not to collapse, no, he can't. Then why can he demand that I go without cream for my coffee until he's replastered his living room? Oh well. Well, anyway. It was decided that nobody had the right to judge a man by his own needs or ability. It was voted on. Yes, ma'am. Politicians voted on it in a public meeting. How else could it be done? And do you care to think what happened at such a meeting? It took just one meeting to discover that we'd all become beggars. Rotten, whining, snivelling beggars. All of us. Because no man could claim his pay as his rightful earnings. He had no rights and no earnings. His work didn't belong to him. It belonged to the community, and they owed him nothing in return. And the only claim he had on them was his needs. So he had to beg in public for relief from his needs, like any lousy moocher, listing all of his troubles and miseries, down to the patches on his drawers and his wife's head cold, hoping that the government would throw him arms. He had to claim misery, because it was misery, not work, that had become the coin of the realm. So it turned into a contest between a country of panhandlers, each claiming that his needs was worse than his brother's. How could it be done? Do you care to guess what happened? What sort of man kept quiet, feeling shame? And what sort got away with the jackpot? Oh, but that wasn't all. There was something else we had discovered at the same meeting. The country's production had fallen by 40% in the first year. So it was decided that somebody hadn't been delivering according to his ability. Who? How could you tell? Well, the politicians voted on that too. They voted that it fell to the best, the people who produced the most, and they taxed them on everything they did, gradually more and more. It came to the time where it made little sense to earn more for the measly amount you were allowed to keep. And do I have to tell you what happened after that? Into what sort of a creature we started to turning? We who had once been humans began to hide whatever ability we had, to slow down and to watch like hawks that we never worked any faster or better than the next fellow. What else could we do when we knew that if we did our best for the community, it's not thanks or reward that we'd get, but punishment? We knew for every stinker who lived his life on welfare because he didn't have to care or through plain incompetence, it was we who had to pay with our nights and our Sundays. So we did our best to be no good. What was it they told us about vicious competition of the profit system, where men had to compete for who'd do a better job than his fellows? Vicious, wasn't it? Well, they should have seen what it was like when they had to compete with one another for who'd do the worst job possible. There's no surer way to destroy a man than to force him into a spot where he has to aim at not doing his best, where he has to struggle to do a bad job day after day. That will finish him quicker than drink or idleness or pulling stick-ups for a living. But there was nothing else for us to do except fake our unfitness. The one accusation we feared was to be suspected of ability. Ability was like a mortgage on you that you can never pay off. And what was there to work for? You knew your basic pittance would be given to you anyway, whether you worked or not. Your housing and feeding allowance, through welfare it was called. And above that pittance, you had no chance to get anything, no matter how hard you tried. You couldn't count on buying a new suit of clothes the next year. They might give you a clothing allowance, or they might not, according to whether nobody broke a leg, needed an operation, or gave birth to more babies. And if there wasn't enough money for new suits for everybody, then you couldn't get yours either. Drink, of course, was what we all turned to. Some more, some less. Don't ask how we got the money for it. When all the decent pleasures are forbidden, there's always ways to get the rotten ones. You don't break into a grocery stores after night, and you don't pick your fellow's pocket to buy classical symphonies or fishing tackle. But if it's to get stinking drunk and forget, you do. It didn't take us long to see how it all worked out. Any man who tried to play it straight had to refuse himself of everything. He lost his taste for any pleasure, unable to afford the luxuries of life for refusing to live off someone else's back. He wouldn't marry. He wouldn't help his folks back home. He wouldn't put an extra burden on the state. Besides, if he still had some sort of responsibility, he couldn't marry or bring children into the world. And when he couldn't plan nothing, promise nothing, count on nothing. But the shiftless and the irresponsible had a field day of it. They bred babies, they got girls in trouble. They dragged every worthless relative they had from all over the world, every unmarried pregnant sister, for extra disability allowance. They got more sickness than any doctor could disprove. They ruined their clothing, their furniture, their homes. What the hell? The government was paying for it. They found more ways of getting in need than the rest of us could ever imagine. They developed a special skill for it, which was the only ability they showed. God help us, ma'am. Do you see what we saw? We saw what they'd been given a law to live by, a moral law they called it, which punished those who observed it for observing it. The more you tried to live up to it, the more you suffered. The more you cheated it, the bigger a reward you got. Your honesty was like a tool left at the mercy of the next man's dishonesty. The honest ones got paid, the dishonest collected. The honest lost, the dishonest won. How long could a man stay good under this sort of law of goodness? We were all a pretty decent bunch of fellows when it started. There weren't many slackers among us. We knew our jobs and we were proud of it, and we worked for the best country in the world. Within 5 years under the new plan, there wasn't an honest man left amongst us. That was the evil, the sort of hell horror evil that preachers used to scare you with, but you never thought you'd see to live. Not that the plan encouraged a few bastards, but that it turned decent people into bastards, and there was nothing else you could do, and it was called a moral ideal. What were we supposed to work for? For the love of our community? What community? For the bums, the loafers, the moochers we saw all around us? And whether they were cheating or plain incompetent, whether they were unwilling or unable, what difference did it make to us? If we were tied for life to the level of their unfitness, faked or real, how long could we care to go on? We had no way of knowing their ability. We had no way of controlling their needs. All we knew is that we were beasts of burden, struggling blindly in some sort of place that was half hospital, half stockyard. A place geared to nothing but disability, disaster, and disease. Beasts put there for the relief of whatever, whoever, choose to say whichever's need. Love of our community. That's when we learned to hate our community for the first time in our lives. We began to hate them for every meal they swallowed, for every small pleasure they enjoyed, for one man's new shirt, for another wife's hat, for an outing with their family, for a paint job on their house. It was taken for us. It was paid for by our work, our denial, our hunger. We began to spy on each other, each hoping to catch the other lying about their needs so that we can cut their allowances at the next meeting. We began to inform on people who reported that somebody had bootlegged a turkey for his family for Sunday, which he paid for by gambling most likely. We began to meddle in each other's lives. We provoked family quarrels to get someone's relatives thrown out. Any time we saw a man starting to go steady with a girl, we made life miserable for him. We broke up many engagements. We didn't want anyone to marry. We didn't want any more dependents to feed. In the old days, we used to celebrate if someone had a baby. We used to chip in and help him out with the hospital bills. If he happened to be hard-pressed for the moment. Now, if a baby was born, we didn't speak to the parents for weeks. Babies to us have become what locusts were to farmers. In the old days, we used to help a man out if he had a bad or illness in the family. Now, well, I'll tell you about one case. It was the mother of a man, been with us for 15 years. She was a kindly old lady, cheerful and wise. She knew us all by our first names, and we liked her. Well, we used to like her. One day she slipped on the cellar stairs and fell and broke her hip. We knew that that meant, but at her age, the doctors said that she'd have to be sent to the hospital for expensive treatment, and it would take a long time. Well, the old lady died the night before she was to leave. No, I wasn't saying murder. Nobody said that. No one would talk about it at all. All I know is that, I can't forget. I too caught myself wishing that she would die. This, may God forgive us, was the nanny state, the security, the abundance that the plan was supposed to achieve for us all. Was there any reason why this sort of horror would ever be preached by anybody? Was there anybody who would profit from it? Was there? Well, the governments and the big corporations, they did. At first I kept wondering how it could be possible that the educated, the cultured, the famous people of the world can make a mistake of this size and preach as righteousness this sort of abomination, when 5 minutes of thought should have told them what would have happened if someone tried to practice what they preached. Now, I know they didn't do it with any kind of mistake. Mistakes of this size are never made innocently. If men fall for some vicious piece of insanity when they had no way to make it work and no possible reason to explain their choice, it's because they had a reason that they do not wish to tell. And we weren't so innocent either. We voted for that plan at the end of that first election. Well, we got what we asked for. And by the time we saw what it was that we'd asked for, it was too late. We were all trapped with no place to go. The best people and companies had left the country in the first few years. We'd lost our best engineers, businessmen, and the highest skilled workers. A person of self-respect doesn't turn into mulch cow for anybody. Some able fellows tried to stick it out, but they couldn't take it for long. They kept escaping from the system like from a pest hole, either by leaving the country or giving up entirely, until we had nothing left but the people of need, but none of the men or the women of ability. And the few of us that were still any good but stayed, after a while we couldn't leave, because nowhere else would have us, for which I can't blame them. Nobody would deal with us in any way, no respectable country or company. So production kept falling, but the costs of living went up. The list of our needy kept stretching, but the production shrank. There was less and less income to divide amongst the more and more people. In the old days, it used to be said that our currency was good as a carat mark on gold. I don't know what the government thought, if they thought at all. But I suppose, like any social planner, and like savages, they thought that this trademark was a magic stamp, which did the trick by some sort of voodoo power, and that would keep them rich, as it had kept their fathers. Well, when the country we exported to began to see that we never delivered on time, and we never put out something that had a fault with it, the magic stamp began to work in the other way around. People wouldn't take our currency as a gift. And by that time, a village half-wit could see that what a generation of professors had pretended not to notice. What good would our need do to a power plant when the generator stopped because nobody knew how to run it? What good would it do to a woman caught on an operating table when the electric lights went out? What good would it do to a passenger of a plane when its motors failed in mid-air? Yet, this was the moral law that the professors and leaders and thinkers had wanted to establish all over the earth. To work, with no chance to rise, with your meals and your clothes and your home and your pleasures depending on any swindler, any famine, any pestilence anywhere on earth. To work with no chance of extra rations till the Cambodians had been fed and the Patagonians had been sent through college. To work on a blank check held by every creature born, by men who you'll never see, whose needs you'll never know, whose ability or laziness or sloppiness or fraud you have no way to learn and no right to question. Just to work and work and work, and to leave it up to the politicians of the world to decide whose stomachs will consume the effort, the dreams and the days of your life. And what's this moral law to accept? This, a moral ideal. Well, who is John Galt?